Have you ever felt, either recently or throughout your life, intense connections with certain people? Those looks that seem to say everything, emotions that arose without explanation, the feeling that someone was made for you. But tell me something, what happens when that connection isn't mutual? What happens when, despite everything you feel, the other person doesn't choose you in the same way? Here's a hidden truth that few are willing to accept. There is a psychological trap, a dangerous secret uncovered by Carl Jung, the revolutionary psychologist who decoded the unconscious mind. This secret explains why men obsessively chase women who reject them, only to mysteriously abandon them once they gain their affection. This pattern is affecting relationships right now, whether you realize it or not. If you're single or in an unstable relationship, what I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes could save you from years of unnecessary emotional suffering. Around 90% of women will go their entire lives without ever discovering this powerful, subconscious pattern that controls their romantic destiny. This isn't just another piece of relationship advice that the dating industry doesn't want you to know. The hidden truth Carl Jung discovered about the male psyche explains why you may be sabotaging, without even knowing it, your chances of being truly loved in this very moment. Here's what no one has the courage to tell you. The man who seems madly in love with you today may be projecting a psychological phantom onto you, and when that illusion dissolves, abandonment becomes inevitable, and the most shocking part, the more intensely he shows love in the beginning, the greater the chance that it's just a temporary projection. If you continue acting without this crucial knowledge, you are destined to repeat the same painful cycle of failed relationships that so many women face every day. Every moment that passes without this information is a moment you allow powerful psychological forces to control your romantic fate. What you're about to learn is a secret so powerful that it marks the difference between being abandoned after passion begins and building a lasting love. This knowledge is available to you now, but it won't be forever. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists in history, identified a fascinating and potentially devastating pattern in the male psyche that explains this seemingly contradictory behavior, which could be sabotaging your love life right now. Jung discovered that the collective unconscious of men carries a primitive longing that draws them irresistibly to mystery and challenge, creating a cycle of attraction and abandonment that leaves millions of women confused and hurt every day. The window of opportunity to apply this knowledge in your life is closing quickly. Today, while there is still time, we'll explore how Jung's theory of the projection of the anima explains why men fall more intensely for women who pull away, and how this understanding can immediately transform your romantic experiences before it's too late. The cost of ignoring these signs could be years wasted in illusory relationships. Each day you go without recognizing these patterns is another day lost in your search for an authentic connection. Get ready for a deep journey through the 5 psychological mechanisms discovered by Jung that explain this destructive dynamic. Each mechanism reveals a deeper layer of this mystery, and by the end, you'll possess an understanding that few people in the world have. Mechanism 1. The projection of the anima. The ghost in the mirror. What really happens in a man's mind when a woman pulls away? Get ready for a disturbing revelation that explains why the most intense romantic connections often collapse without warning. Jung discovered a psychological phenomenon called the anima, the inner female that every man carries hidden in his unconscious. This powerful force shapes male attraction in ways that most relationship experts completely overlook, and this is the first key to understanding why rejection creates obsession. When a woman pulls away, something unsettling happens. She becomes a blank canvas for the projection of the anima. The emptiness created by her absence is filled with idealized fantasies that intensify the attraction to obsessive levels. It's as if the male mind fills in the blanks with its own perfect expectations, creating an idealized version that no real person could ever match. Can you see how this creates the perfect psychological trap? Here's the first painful secret that 99% of women never discover. When you become the object of a man's intense adoration after pulling away, he isn't loving the real you. He's falling in love with a psychological ghost he created in his own mind, a projection that will eventually shatter against reality. Have you ever wondered why so many men obsessively pursue a woman only to completely lose interest after finally winning her over? What unconscious force could explain this irrational behavior that leaves so many women confused and hurt? The truth is, when the distance shrinks, the projection violently collides with reality, and the enchantment often breaks in a devastating way. Think deeply about your past relationships. How many times did you feel that a man wasn't in love with you, but with an idealized version of you that existed only in his mind? What would your love life look like if you could identify this pattern before it destroyed your chances of happiness? Mechanism 2. Emotional scarcity, when the unavailable becomes irresistible. Here comes the second revelation that will challenge everything you believe about male attraction. Jungian psychology unveils a primitive and irrational mechanism in the male mind that few men would ever admit. When a woman becomes inaccessible, she triggers an ancient circuit in the male psyche that equates rarity with immense value. This drive is so deep that it operates entirely beneath the level of consciousness. That's why a woman who is always available and loving can tragically be perceived as having less value, while one who maintains emotional distance becomes a prize to be won at any cost. This knowledge is unsettling, but ignoring it could cost you years of unnecessary emotional suffering. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever felt inexplicably drawn to someone who seemed indifferent to your existence while ignoring those who were loving and available? What does this say about our deepest psychological mechanisms? Imagine this scenario. You meet two people. One openly shows interest, affection, and availability. The other is distant, unpredictable, sometimes interested, sometimes completely absent. Which one stirs more curiosity and desire in you? Why does our psyche seem programmed to value those who reject us? The answer to these questions reveals a pattern so deeply rooted in the collective unconscious that 99% of people will remain trapped in this self-destructive cycle forever, unless they discover the next critical factor. Mechanism 3. The archetype of the unattainable maiden, the mythological trap. Prepare for the third secret that few people ever come to understand. Jung identified a powerful archetype buried deep in the male collective unconscious, the unattainable maiden. This isn't just another psychological theory, it's a primal force that controls male behavior without their awareness. When a woman pulls away, she awakens this ancestral archetype in the male mind, creating an almost mythological attraction. The man enters an altered state of consciousness, no longer responding to the real woman, but to an archetypal representation that promises profound spiritual transformation. Are you starting to see the hidden danger in this dynamic? The most important question might be this: were the most intense relationships of your life built on genuine love or on unconscious archetypal projections? This phenomenon explains why so many men describe the feeling of finally becoming whole when they meet that special woman who initially seemed out of reach. But what were your experiences with men who claimed they had never felt anything so deep for anyone before? How long did that magic really last? What most people never realize is the tragic nature of this dynamic. They are projecting their own potential for wholeness onto a distant female figure, creating a logical trap. And here arises the most unsettling question. Would you rather be intensely loved by an idealized projection that will inevitably vanish, or moderately yet genuinely loved for who you truly are? Mechanism 4. The shadow pattern, the wound seeking the blade. The fourth revelation is perhaps the most disturbing of all. Jung discovered an element in the human psyche he called the shadow, those parts of ourselves we repress and deny. When a man falls obsessively in love with a woman who distances herself, something sinister is at play. He is being dominated by his own shadow, tied to deep feelings of abandonment and rejection. What you need to understand now is that this shadow pattern transforms the primal male fear of not being enough into a compulsive attraction toward the very person who confirms that fear. It's like a psychological wound constantly seeking the same blade that once cut it in an unconscious attempt to heal. Have you ever noticed how men with deep insecurities tend to fall harder for women who reject them? Jung would explain this as a dangerous shadow pattern where a man tries, without realizing it, to heal his wounds of rejection by winning over the one who rejected him. This cycle can become addictive and destructive, leading to relationships marked by intense passion followed by abandonment. Few manage to break out of this cycle, but the next mechanism reveals the psychological key that may finally set you free from this toxic pattern. Mechanism 5, the individuation cycle. When you become a mirror. We've arrived at the fifth and deepest secret Jung revealed about the male psyche. This concept is so transformative that it could permanently redefine how you understand relationships. Individuation is the process by which we become psychologically whole and integrated. For men, this involves a desperate quest to integrate the inner feminine. When a woman pulls away, something extraordinary happens. Paradoxically, she becomes a perfect mirror for the man to project and begin to recognize his own repressed feminine. If you don't understand this mechanism, you risk being used as a tool in someone else's psychological journey. This dynamic creates a devastating paradox. The more a woman preserves her mystery and distance, the more she becomes a reflection of the man's unexplored inner world. What he's really seeking, without being consciously aware of it, is a reconnection with the repressed parts of himself. Are you being loved for who you truly are? Or are you being used as a mirror for someone else's self-discovery? And now the most surprising revelation. This same mechanism works in the opposite direction. The uncomfortable truth is that you may also be projecting your animus, your inner masculine archetype, onto the men you meet. What you believe to be love at first sight is often nothing more than a powerful unconscious projection of your own inner masculine potential. Now that you understand these deep psychological mechanisms discovered by Jung, we reach the transformative moment of this journey. I'm going to reveal something most relationship experts don't have the courage to face, let alone share publicly. The emotional tension you felt building throughout this explanation wasn't accidental. It mirrors exactly what happens in the male psyche during projection. At this moment, you are experiencing, in real time, the psychological pattern that has silently shaped your relationships. Here are the 5 unmistakable signs that show when you're being used as a projection screen. How many of these will you recognize from your current or past relationships? Excessive idealization as a hidden trap. He begins attributing to you nearly supernatural qualities and an impossible perfection. Pay close attention to phrases like, "I've never met anyone like you," "You're different from all the others," or "It feels like I've known you my whole life." Does this sound familiar? This idealization intensifies in an unsettling way when you maintain emotional distance. The cruel psychological truth is that he's not seeing the real you. He's seeing a psychological ghost he created in his own mind, one you can never live up to. Growing obsession with rejection. Notice this dark pattern. The more you pull away, the more his interest intensifies to disturbing levels. Constant messages, unexpected gifts, intense declarations of love. These reveal that he's caught in a psychological projection, not connected to the real person you are. This is the most dangerous stage, where obsession can manifest as possessiveness. Magnetic attraction to mystery. Like a moth drawn to a flame that will destroy it, he becomes inexplicably attracted to the unknown aspects of your personality. He forms elaborate theories about who you really are or what you're thinking, showing more interest in the hidden parts of you than in the qualities you openly express. What he is desperately seeking in you is his own shadow reflected back at him. Almost mystical transformation. With a feverish gaze, he claims to feel completely alive or reborn in your presence. He describes sensations of euphoria and transcendence as if under the influence of a powerful drug. This altered state of consciousness is not true love, it's the manifestation of archetypal projection working at the most primitive levels of his psyche. The inevitable collapse, the final and most devastating sign. Once the distance disappears and he finally wins you over, his interest fades like mist in the morning sun. The intensity evaporates, the enchantment breaks, and he may even feel a strange sense of repulsion. The cruel truth is revealed. It was the idealized projection, not you, that attracted him from the start. Are you ready for the final revelation that could change how you experience relationships forever? We've reached the culmination of this journey into the depths of Jungian psychology. You now hold the hidden truth that Jung uncovered about the male psyche, a truth many would prefer to keep secret, but that is now in your hands. The paradox of distance and attraction is not just a relationship game. It is a deep, primal psychological mechanism rooted in the deepest layers of the male collective unconscious. This understanding represents the pinnacle of psychological insight into love and connection. But here comes the transformation you've been waiting for. The turning point that justifies all the tension built so far. Understanding this dark dynamic doesn't mean manipulating others or surrendering to cynicism. It's the first step toward freeing yourself from the unconscious patterns that may have shaped your love life until now. When you recognize projection, it loses its power over you. And now the final revelation that changes everything. The real power of this knowledge is not in using distance to manipulate attraction, but in recognizing when you yourself are being moved by unconscious projections. True liberation happens when you can see through the psychological illusions that control both men and women. Imagine building a relationship where you are loved for who you truly are, not for a projection of an ancient archetype in someone's mind. Imagine the freedom of no longer being a screen for unconscious fantasies, but a genuine human being in real connection with another. The most powerful question is not how to use this knowledge to manipulate attraction, but how to transcend these primitive patterns to create bonds based on reality, not fantasy. Genuinely transformative love only arises when we stop being mirrors for unconscious projections and instead become fully present in our complex humanity. What you do with this knowledge will determine your romantic destiny. The choice is now yours. The relational intelligence you've just acquired goes against everything traditional dating advice teaches about attraction. This is rare psychological insight that can literally save you years of unnecessary emotional suffering, but only if you act now before these powerful unconscious patterns regain control of your love life. This Jungian wisdom about the male psyche is deliberately kept out of reach for most women because it reveals an uncomfortable truth about attraction. Right now, countless women around you are trapped in destructive cycles of idealization and abandonment, desperately wondering why men chase them so intensely, only to lose interest mysteriously afterward. They are suffering needlessly, unaware of the forces I've just revealed to you. The window to transform your relationships through this knowledge is closing fast. Every day that passes, thousands of women lose the chance to build authentic connections because they remain trapped in cycles of projection. If you recognized any of the 5 alarming signs in your past or current relationships, share this message immediately with someone who desperately needs it, before they make irreversible mistakes. It could be the difference between years of pain and liberation for someone you love. Here's what I want you to do now. Look back at your romantic history and identify which of these 5 dangerous signs of anima projection appeared most frequently. Was it excessive idealization, obsession with rejection, or perhaps the mystical transformation he claimed to experience in your presence? This is not just a theoretical exercise. Your insight could save another woman from years of emotional pain. Share your experience in the comments below. Your courage in exposing this pattern might light the escape path for countless others stuck in the same destructive cycle that you now know how to recognize. Your comment could be the wake-up call someone desperately needs today. Subscribe and turn on notifications to receive the next installment in this exclusive Jungian psychology series. The upcoming content will uncover the dangerous male archetype that every woman unconsciously projects. Understanding it may instantly free you from the devastating pattern of recurring relationships in your life. This psychological wisdom on relationship patterns won't be available forever. Join the community of women who have awakened to the hidden forces shaping their love lives. Your future self will thank you for taking this one simple step today. And what if I told you that the most intense obsession a man feels when you reject him has nothing to do with you, but instead reveals the deepest wound of his inner child, which he is desperately trying to heal through you? This psychological revelation will fundamentally change how you interpret male behavior forever, and it will finally free you from taking his reactions personally. Jung discovered something profound about the male psyche that few therapists dare to discuss openly. When a man becomes obsessively attracted to a woman who pulls away, he is unconsciously trying to heal his primal wound of maternal rejection. Every boy experiences a natural separation from his mother, a psychological weaning that is necessary for the development of his masculine identity. Yet this separation always leaves a hidden wound, a yearning for the perfect, unconditional love that once enveloped him completely. Here is the psychological mechanism that will transform your understanding. When you create emotional distance, you unconsciously activate this ancient maternal wound in his psyche. His obsessive pursuit isn't about winning you over, it's about healing the original rejection that shaped his most primitive emotional model. This creates a devastating cycle. The more you pull away, the more you trigger his abandonment wound, intensifying his pursuit to pathological levels. Paradoxically, when you become fully available, you remove the emotional tension that mirrors his original wound, and his interest mysteriously vanishes. Think back on your past relationships with brutal honesty. Have you noticed how men with more traumatic childhoods often become the most obsessively attached when you distance yourself? That's no coincidence. It's the wounded boy inside the man desperately trying to heal, recreating and attempting to resolve his original trauma. What few understand is that this cycle creates an emotional dependency stronger than any chemical substance. The neurochemical cocktail released during cycles of pursuit, momentary connection, and renewed rejection generates a psychological addiction that can last for decades if not recognized and addressed. Ask yourself, in your current relationship, are you unconsciously playing the role of his rejecting mother figure? Are you perpetuating a cycle that can never lead to healthy attachment? Here's the most uncomfortable truth. Many women intuitively sense this dynamic and unconsciously manipulate it to maintain control in relationships. But this manipulation comes at a terrible cost. It ensures the relationship remains stuck at the level of neurotic attachment rather than evolving into genuine love. We've now reached the most transformative part of this journey, the moment when knowledge becomes power to create real change in your relationships. Everything we've explored leads to this critical question. How do you break the cycle of projection and rejection to build an authentic connection? Jung gave an answer so profound that it is rarely discussed in traditional relationship counseling. The path forward requires something deeply counterintuitive, the conscious integration of your masculine and feminine energies within yourself. When you become psychologically whole through your own process of individuation, you no longer need to seek completeness by projecting it onto others. This integration process begins with a radical act of psychological courage, recognizing and withdrawing your own projections. Every time you feel a sudden and overwhelming attraction to someone, stop and ask yourself, am I seeing the real person or am I projecting my inner animus onto him? The uncomfortable truth is that projection works both ways. Just as men project the anima onto you, you project your animus, your inner masculine, onto them. That feeling of he completes me is often nothing more than the recognition of rejected masculine qualities that you've projected outward, instead of integrating them within. Here is the most powerful revelation. When you withdraw your projections and integrate both your feminine and masculine aspects, you become psychologically whole. And that wholeness creates a completely different kind of magnetism. There's no longer a desperate attraction born of incompleteness seeking fullness, but a natural gravitation between two authentic beings who recognize each other. Jung called this conjunctio, the sacred union of opposites within the psyche. When you achieve this inner union, your relationships transform from neurotic patterns into conscious choices. You no longer need someone to complete you, you choose someone to complement your wholeness. This integration doesn't mean rejecting your feminine essence. It means owning all parts of yourself: strength and vulnerability, logic and intuition, assertiveness and receptivity, without projecting the disowned parts onto others. The paradox few understand is this: true intimacy only becomes possible when you no longer need it to feel whole. When you are complete in yourself, you can finally see others as they truly are, not as screens for your projections. Consider for a moment how your relationships would change if you approached them from a place of wholeness instead of need. What would happen if you could see others as they truly are, not as carriers of your projected animus? And what if they could see you as you truly are, not as the embodiment of their anima-driven fantasies? This is the ultimate liberation that Jung's psychology offers, freedom from the unconscious forces that have ruled human relationships for millennia. The difference between being driven by projections and consciously creating authentic connections grounded in reality. The question now is not whether you can be loved, but whether you can love beyond projection. Can you remove the fantasy and embrace the full, imperfect reality of another human being? That is the challenge and the supreme reward of conscious relationship. We've reached the point of integration, where every thread of our Jungian exploration comes together. You now hold a knowledge that most will never discover about the hidden psychological forces that shape attraction and relationships. The question is no longer what you know, but what you will do with what you now know. Will you use it as a tool of manipulation, creating artificial distance to trigger projection and obsession, or as a path to liberation, for yourself and others caught in unconscious cycles? Jung believed that consciousness was the highest moral achievement possible, that bringing light to unconscious patterns was an ethical act with deep spiritual implications. The knowledge you now carry holds this same ethical dimension. Here lies the definitive choice before you. Will you continue participating in the dance of projection and rejection, now with the awareness that gives you temporary power? Or will you step out of this ancestral pattern entirely and create a new relational paradigm based on truly seeing and being seen? The first path may offer short-term control, but it guarantees long-term suffering. The second path requires courage to leave behind familiar patterns, but it opens the possibility for genuine connection that doesn't dissolve when projections inevitably collapse. Imagine a world where relationships aren't built on neurotic projection, but on conscious recognition. Imagine connections that deepen over time, rather than burning bright and then fading away. This is the possibility Jung's psychology opens before us, not just better relationships, but a more integrated humanity. The deepest truth I can leave you with is this: the strength, the wisdom, the love you once sought in others, those qualities you projected onto partners, have always lived within you, waiting to be seen, reclaimed, and integrated. Your wholeness does not lie in finding the perfect person to project onto, but in seeing yourself as already whole within. This is the sacred marriage Jung spoke of, not between two people, but between the divided aspects of your own soul. So I ask you one last time, what will you do with this psychological wisdom that most women will never discover? Will you stay in the old dance of idealization and rejection, where intense attraction inevitably turns to abandonment? Or will you use this knowledge to set yourself free and create something revolutionary? Authentic relationships rooted in truly seeing and being seen. The decision you make now will shape not just the quality of your future relationships, but the evolution of your entire emotional life. Most will return to unconscious patterns. But I believe you are different. Choose consciousness. Choose reality over fantasy. Choose freedom over the familiar pain of projection. And remember, the same psychological forces that once bound you can now become the foundation of your liberation. The power has always been within you. Jung simply showed us where to look.